Hello and welcome back to HRD Live at the HRD Summit UK 2020, where I'm joined by the stars of the Strategy Panel podcast from just last year. Jon Ingham, Mark Bouch and Cath Bailey. How are you all doing?
Great, thank you.
Yeah, excellent.
Yeah?
Really good.
Start. We're all super famous now, of course, after the podcast, because it was such a tremendous success. But anyway, to return to the summit, first of all, what are the ideas we're going to be sharing with everyone? Cath, first of all, you guys are in a panel discussion, is that right? What's going to be the subject of that?
So I think we're still going to be talking about transformation, change, and really what the disruptors are that impact sort of change in the organisation.
Fantastic. And it's the same for you, Mark? That's your real focus?
So what's coming through for me, and very much reinforcing some of what the two keynote speakers were talking about this morning, is there are a number of drivers and disruptors of change, but the impact is uncertainty, and that's, I think, really what we're needing to prepare people for, is an uncertain future. And one of the things that stuck with me from this morning was this idea that 50% of the roles that people are going to be doing over the next 10 years are not yet defined.
Right, so how on earth do you cope with that kind of uncertainty?
Well, I think that's some of the question that we're
That's
going
the
to
big
have to
question.
try and unravel
Yeah.
this afternoon.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Looking forward to the challenge.
Wonderful. And Jon, how about you? What are you bringing to the audiences today?
So I'm on my own, unfortunately, but we'll try to entertain people anyway. I agree. I thought this morning's keynote set us all up really nicely. So Bernard Marr was talking about artificial intelligence, and as that takes hold, basically it means anything that's important are the sort of relationships we have with each other. Margaret Heffernan was talking about social capital. So it's particularly that area I'm going to be focusing on. How do we create better relationships, better organisational groupings that enable people to work together, and particularly what is the leader's focus to be able to do that?
Fantastic. So aside from those individual sessions then, what are the real ideas that you really want to hear discussed here at the Summit, do you think, along those lines? What do you want to hear people talking about?
So I think for me, we talk a lot about digital and digital transformations, but how do you really make that happen? Because it's not just about kind of defining the capabilities, but how do you really drive change to organisations? I think about my kids; they are digital natives. They don't even think about it. You are, but actually, there needs to be training, retraining and upskilling. I think to really make that work.
Fantastic. Okay. How about you, Mark?
I think it's about organisational culture, and I think the dynamic that particularly interests me, you'd probably expect me to say, let's all talk about the leadership, but actually it's this business about letting go of things that perhaps today are complicated, perhaps routine management tasks. They're clearly not going to have a role at some point in our future, so we've got to see change to make culturally in organisations about how do we create meaningful roles for people that focus on their human value? The points that came up this morning around, about creativity, about their human conscience, about empathy. This implies some pretty big cultural shifts in organisations, I think, and I'd love to hear more about that and how people are thinking of preparing organisations.
Fascinating. And what about you, Jon? What are the big ideas that you're waiting to hear?
Well, I was just thinking Mark should be coming to my session, really, but...
If I get scared, I'll run over.
Well, just in terms of, so what I was just saying, that what matters these days is that sort of social connection, which is behind culture. So I try not to be too prescriptive about sort of what I'm looking for. What will happen will happen. So this morning, my best conversation so far was probably with Peter Riley, who used to be at the Institute for Employment Studies, and we were talking about modern philosophy.
Wow.
And what philosophers sort of know and how that relates to artificial intelligence, which was a brilliant conversation.
Wow.
But I wouldn't have come here saying, right, I'm going to look for something on philosophy.
Of course.
So some of the sessions I'll go to because either I know the person or the topic's very close to what I focus on. A lot of the sessions will be things I know nothing, or I don't know, just I haven't been to room 7 before, so let's see what's happening in there. Because you never know, and there's I think any session you go to, there's always something to take away, and sometimes it's the things that you're not expecting which are the most powerful.
That's such a good point. I think that links to what you were saying as well about talking about bringing modern philosophy into it. It's the unexpected, right? It's things we're not used to. So if it's creativity or empathy, that might be. It's being open to so we've never done that or even approached it. It might be a total shift in our cultural mindset. But that's what we should be thinking about, and that's the point of bringing everyone together, I suppose. Lastly then, I'd like to do a full reprise of the podcast, but sadly we have other interviews to do. But so for those of our audience who can't be here to enjoy your sessions, what would be one key takeaway that you'd like to share with them from your session? What's one key thought you'd like to leave with them?
Well, it's this build actually on what Margaret talked about this morning. So the idea of how do you unleash creativity in organisations to solve business problems. And one of the things that certainly I'm a big believer in is kind of bringing together power teams, short sprints, but I like the idea of kind of presenting the business problems and then people signing up to, actually I'm really passionate about that and I want to join that team. Fantastic. So I think just a different way of thinking about it.
Wonderful, Mark.
Well, my theme actually, I think, builds on yours, or at least sort of complements it. It's this idea of strategic agility that, without a doubt, organisations, either in whole or in part, are going to need to be able to react very quickly, whilst at the same time reacting to much longer-term trends, as well as those sort of more immediate day-to-day sort of threats. And that implies a big role, I think, for the way that people adapt to change and can personally change direction and organisations change direction. Huge demands, I think, on the HR community, learning and development professionals and leaders throughout the organisation. So that's where I want to go.
Wonderful. And Jon?
So I completely admit agility is, like digital, one of the key things I think that's going to colour much of what we hear and talk about these 2 days. And power teams are obviously part of that. And I remember being really compelled by that idea when we spoke last time as well. I think the more that we get people focusing on doing work more quickly and more smartly, the more we need a parallel component of organisations which is more about humanity and relatedness as well. Because even though Agile is supposedly about people rather than process, it's still about work,
the organisation
and the amount of work and the velocity and so on. So I think it's really important that we can still get people together around things they're passionate about and have them talk about those elements as well. So I'd encourage people to think about their organisations. And Margaret Heffernan talked about the teams and the networks, and they're increasingly essential as well. But let's think about community. It's an important aspect of organisation too.
We need to make time for that.
Yeah. We do, totally.
In a busy world. I think that's the key, isn't it? We can't just take it for granted it's going to happen.
Yeah.
Right, fantastic. Thank you so much to all three of you for joining me again. It's great to see you all again.
Good to see you.
I really hope I can join those sessions because they sound fantastic. Stay tuned, everyone, for more from HRD Live very soon.